This is your host, and I've got a special guest today that I've been waiting to get on the show for some time. This is Al Wynant. He is the co-founder and CEO of Ingomu. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, but he's a personal development person. So career advancement, health and wellness coach. Those are all the things that he offers, and it's holistic. So, that's why anybody who's listening to the Dr. Digital podcast knows why I've been wanting to get Al on the program. So, with that, thank you very much, Al, for joining us today. I hope that you can tell us a little bit about your background and how was it that you got into this fascinating field in the first place?
Thanks, Mick, for having me. I really appreciate it. And you're close, it's Ingomu. So it's kind of a funny name because we can always have conversations around it. But it's one of those stories, how did I get into this field? I'm definitely not doing what I went to school for. But I ended up in this field. I've always, for a long time, been looking sort of to make, my goal's always been like, how can I make a positive difference in the world by helping as many people as possible? That's a really lofty goal, of course.
Yeah, it is.
So, and I'm sort of one of these people, like I see a puppy, it's like, oh, I want to take it home. I see a homeless person, I want to do something for this person. So I've had this innate thing to help people. But I've sort of been looking, how do I do that? And I've been a development director, worked for nonprofits, I've donated, I've served on boards, but just never really sort of, met that need. And a couple of weeks ago, I was no, a couple of years ago, sorry, not a couple of weeks ago, I was sitting at a coffee shop in Boulder, and it sort of came to us because I'm a very strong believer in coaching. I'm not a coach myself. I'm surrounded by lots of lovely coaches and amazing coaches, but it sort of came to me like, what if we leverage the power of coaching and make coaching accessible, affordable, equitable, etc. So coaching can be available because coaching is in essence, an expensive thing to do for people, but everyone can use a coach or multiple coaches. So I sat in a coffee shop going like, oh, we can do something with this. And so that's how we started building out the concept for Ingomu, which is an app, it's technology that brings coaches together with our subscribers or learners, we call them in coaching community. So very strange. Yeah, I've never, it's one of those very strange paths to be here, to come here and end up in this job. Never thought in the beginning of my career that I would end up here. But what I do really is meeting, that innate desire to make a difference to people. So that's kind of how how that came together. So it's been an interesting adventure.
Yeah, it's not that surprising that you're not doing what you studied in college. Not all that many people do anyway. So, it's life, and that's okay. But could you talk a little bit about the changes that you've seen over the course of your career and what kinds of things that have you experienced?
That's a good question, and actually, I thought about that since we had our first conversation, and so my experience is about 35 years or so, and as I think with most people, when you first start out, you know everything, know your boss, your manager, they can never tell you what to do. So, for myself, I'm thinking that at this particular stage in my life, I go like, I know so little, and so I've learned to open myself up to other people's ideas and advice and mentorship and coaching. So that's for me been a huge change in my life. But I've also seen as I look at stuff around me on how what I find very beautiful is how so much when I went to school as we didn't have iPhones and any of those kind of things, but how technology now has made so much accessible to so many. So I think that's a huge change and it's something I experienced. We all use YouTube and podcasts to learn things and so on. So I think that's beautiful. But for me, really, it's been on a personal level, that growth and being open to the mentorship and the advice of other people. And it took me a little while to get there, I have to admit.
Well, better late than never, they say, right? So,
my mom would probably say, finally, he got there.
got through to the guy. Yes, I can understand. That I can relate to. In some of these changes that you've seen, whether they're technological or coaching in field or in your own career, are there some areas that you could identify that are growth areas? And is it technological? Is it personal changes in organization, governance of companies? What kinds of things have you seen in terms of growth?
So I think when I look at our industry, it's a very strange thing. So we're a technology company
Yeah.
who brings coaches together, with our users. So,
Okay.
but when I look, I like to look more at the world of coaching. That world is really changing quite fast in the big scheme of things, because there's this paradigm of one-on-one coaching. You work one-on-one with a coach, and
Yeah.
that is not accessible to everyone and attainable for everyone, and people need multiple coaches. So how do you make that more attainable? So that move into, or opening more up of the market into virtual group coaching or group coaching, is
Okay.
just an amazing change. So that's one thing. The other thing, which is kind of an interesting conversation to have, is you know everyone can be a coach, but not everyone should be a coach in the big
Yeah.
scheme of things. So there's so many people who, after some experience, they suddenly become a coach. They're a life coach, they're a business coach, and so on.
Hmm.
But it's still a little bit the Wild West. Coaching is still sort of the Wild West of this. So there needs to be a little bit more, I don't want to say regulation, but some more guidelines, best practices around that.
Okay.
So there's some involvement happening in that. And I think, with technology, where I see a lot of changes, you see through artificial intelligence, AI, you
Mm.
see the right resources being connected with the
Okay.
right, with the person who needs it, versus, like, when you look at some technology and you have access to 9,000 coaches, where the hell do you begin?
Yeah.
Who should you go to? Well,
Sure.
through sharing your needs, and through AI,
Okay.
that technology develops and so on as well. So there's sort of an interesting, it makes coaching no longer just for the C-suite. It makes it available and accessible to everyone. So
Okay.
those are some of the three, big changes I see specifically in the coaching industry. And
Hmm.
with how we operate as a business, it's I've worked from home for quite some time, but through the pandemic, how working has changed.
Hmm.
I think it's sort of refreshing to see that you can do things in a different way. And I think that's still going to develop. And I don't think we're at a place yet where we've all figured it out. But I think the hybrid form of work and how we can operate companies, that is sort of an interesting thing that's come out of that as well. I mean, I'm very fortunate. My team, we're in 6 or 7 different countries,
No.
and most of the people I work with, I've never met in person. It's all been virtual, and occasionally we get together, with a smaller group locally. But yeah, technology makes this so much easier as well. So that's a big change there too. And I'm really curious to see how that's going to further develop, because sometimes you just have to meet people in person. You know.
Sure, sure. It's like I'm a little old-fashioned now, because I remember those days before there were iPhones and before all the technology. So, that's kind of still a part of me. I always say I can separate myself from it, where I could see other people
Hmm.
can't separate themselves from it, where I have no problem putting it aside because it's not what my life revolves around. So, when you are helping people, is this business owners? Would these be individuals, since you're saying it's group or individual? So, like, what is a typical client or clients? So what is that process like when you work with people?
Well, like I said earlier, everyone needs a coach or can use a coach, and we always go, "What keeps you up at night?"
Okay.
Everyone lives away from something. So we work with, if you are an individual user and you want to use the app, you're very welcome to use that
Okay.
for what your needs are, what keeps you up at night. But we also work with companies, educational institutions, who deal with student issues, who deal with retention, absenteeism,
Sure.
productivity, and all that sort of stuff. But we work really around the issues of life, soul, wellness, and work. So, because everybody is dealing with something in that area,
Mm.
and how do you as a person show up for school? How do you show up as a person for work? And in many cases, the issues that you're having are not necessarily work related. They're usually personal. and your company or your school isn't going to help you with that. So, where do you find those resources? Do you want to wait, 3 months to get an appointment with a coach or therapist or whatever resources they may have available? We make it that, anyone, either being an employee or a student or an individual, they can get the help when they need it, in a live virtual session. And it's fully private as well. So you can jump in there. I wouldn't know who Mick is unless you say, this is who I am and this is where I'm at. It is also very private, but it is group. So the group uplifts, it's a community, and they're all going through, a specific, issue around grief or divorce or something at work, leadership, whatever. So we do all these different things though. So I hope it answers your question on that one.
It does. And it's going to follow up with saying, then what kind of expertise do you offer people? Because it is a holistic approach, and it does seem like it's not limited to anything. So what kinds of things are typical, or somebody who is interested, people who are hearing and listening, what kinds of things would you find are fairly typical, or what do you run into? Because you mentioned schools or colleges and things of that nature.
So a good example with schools. So
Yeah.
students, especially, I'm not talking high school kids here. I'm talking college students, higher
Sure.
ed. There's sort of a general issues there, and they're dealing with stress and anxiety because all the things they have to do. They're dealing with financial issues and so on. So if a student were to use it, and it affects their grades, it affects if they show up for class and so on. So a student can come in and they go like, okay, great, I can go into a coaching session that deals with anxiety. It deals with how to be mindful, how to focus. There's coaches for that. We have a coach for that, I would like to say. But if they're dealing with financial issues, like I don't know how to budget, I don't know how to adult, so to speak, as the kids say, then they can go to a coach and work on something like that, and they'll be guided through those processes. Maybe it's somebody at work, and it could be an issue that relates to work. How do I'm suddenly being made a VP here. I have no idea how to do this. So I need to get some leadership insights and sales insights. So we have coaches for that. But they can be going through a divorce, they can go through a loss, they can go through some wellness issues, chronic pain, and so on. So it's not therapeutic. So it's pure coaching here. It's not diagnostic, but therapeutic. So when we say holistic, this means we have these coaches that they're all complementary to each other. And so if you today and you have an issue, I always go like, today you may have an issue around wellness and you work with that coach, and tomorrow you can come home and you go like, how do I talk to my 16-year-old kid? So we have a coach for that too. And if suddenly you have a loss in your family, we have a grief coach who can work with that. So there's a coach for every need that you may have. And we also, we keep an eye on stuff. If there's issues that crop up that we don't have a coach for, then we'll bring somebody in as well. So
yeah, so you're not limited, I guess, is the answer, really, because there are as many people as there are as many problems that they run into, and it can be virtually any aspect of their life.
Correct. And so if you were to hire a coach one-on-one, you get to work with one coach.
Yes.
And other platforms, excuse me, sorry about that, out there, you can potentially schedule an appointment with a coach for a session, again, one-on-one. We say we have dozens of coaches, 50 plus coaches in all these issues around work, life, wellness, and soul, and basically have at it. Mm-hmm. So if today you're having an issue, you can go to a session. Tomorrow there may be different issues. So the sessions are live, so you can really interact with the coach. So it's not a video, but they are recorded. So if you want to go, I want to go to that session again, or if you missed a session, or with the time difference here, it makes it a little bit harder. You can still participate in the session and watch the video, but then still engage with the coach in the community, via discussions, sessions in there as well. So we make it really accessible, because everyone lays awake at something at night.
Yep. And then just to clarify that, you're really saying that a person doesn't have just one coach. In other words, they have a number of issues and they can continue to come back for different types of coaching. Oh.
Yes, everyone has access to every coach on the platform. So
Nice.
we have one of our coaches, and he always starts the beginning of the session. If there's somebody new here, because they're recorded and there's previous sessions available, he's like, "So I invite you to binge watch my sessions. Grab a bucket of popcorn or some ice cream and watch all my sessions." So to speak. So it's just a great thing for the learners to kind of, and if they want a refresher, they can go look at it and say like, yeah, that was a great session. I want to see that again. Or that was a great exercise or something like that. So I want to see that again. So we make that accessible like that. So
Gotcha. Understood. So there's a number of things that really are offered. So I was curious then, as people are listening and who doesn't have a problem and who doesn't need a coach, how would you suggest that they get a hold of you? Because you do offer this really vast and holistic type of approach that really includes just about everybody, depending on their needs. So how do they get a hold of you? What would they do?
the best and the easiest way is to go to our website. It's ingomu.com, and I think it's on my name here. So it's ingomu.com.
It is.
So you can go learn everything there. You can even download the app there. You can contact me to the contact form as well. I invite you to do that. Or you can connect with me through LinkedIn as well. And it's my name followed by 9700. So that's my LinkedIn profile name, I guess they call it. So you're welcome to connect with me there as well. So if you have questions, want to connect, chat, feel free to do that. I always welcome that.
Outstanding. Well, thank you for taking some time, Al. This has been fantastic. It is really a service. So whatever you learned in college and over life, you have really addressed the issues that people need help, and you're out there. So I appreciate you taking some time and chatting today.
Thanks, Mick, for inviting me. It's my pleasure. Glad to, and thank you for allowing me to share this today.
You bet. So thanks again, Al. And this is another episode of the Doctor of Digital podcast. Hopefully you've listened and learned a lot. And stay till the next time. We've got some more guests and more things, good information for you. Until next time, this is Doctor of Digital signing off. Day is full.